All right. So today we're going to go ahead and jump into this micro session. So, what we're talking about is why so many high performers don't feel burned out but are.
Mm,
And a few years ago, I personally realized something strange about burnout. I kept meeting people in my corporate life and leaders who insisted that they weren't burned out. But
mm,
it was because they were still performing extremely well at a high level. And they were leading teams, right? They were solving problems quickly. They were holding everything together. At least it
mhm,
appeared that way, right? And
mhm.
it's that raises a really strange question about burnout. So I think the question then becomes, have you ever thought you couldn't possibly be burned out because you're still performing too well?
You asking me that?
In general, right? Like these are
Okay,
rhetorical questions for now, but I will have Q&A at the end, Archie. But
okay.
yes, that it's just a rhetorical question. Like, have you ever thought about it from that perspective, right?
Mhm,
That maybe you just couldn't, you don't feel burned out. You're like, I'm not burned out, but it's because like everything in your life appears to be great, okay, functioning, right? Maybe not
mhm,
great.
mm,
But I think the point is that most people assume that burnout looks like collapse. And so it looks like exhaustion. It looks like disengagement. It looks like being kind of apathetic, not caring anymore. But many high performers actually never reach that stage because they just keep functioning. They
mm.
just keep pushing forward. And sometimes they do it extremely well. And that I think is the a reframe, and that's exactly why burnout can go unnoticed for so long.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a competence paradox here. High performers, and you may all be able to relate, that are very good at adapting. They're very good, especially at adapting to pressure. So when something becomes difficult for them, they immediately compensate. They take on more responsibility. They solve problems faster. They actually carry more complexity. And again, from the outside, it appears like everything is working as it's supposed to. But internally, something important often starts to disappear. Maybe you can guess what that is. It's recovery. And then that leads to another question. And this kind of becomes an identity question. What if burnout doesn't start when your performance drops, but when recovery disappears? So think about that. When maybe burnout doesn't start when performance drops, but when that recovery period isn't being given and it disappears. It's a very different way of looking at burnout because many leaders are still performing at a really high level. But the clincher, the difference is that their nervous system never truly downshifts, right? So, hey, Stanimira. So, it's basically it's like, okay, everything is functioning at a high level, but then when rest comes, it's not really recovery. It's not really rest because your nervous system is never truly downshifting out of an activation mode.
Mhm.
So at this point, like people are asking themselves, okay, well, if I'm burned out, then why do I still feel so functional? And we kind of touched on it. It's adaptation. And so, again, high performers, high achieving women especially, are extremely good at overriding signals, especially in their bodies. So instead of collapse, burnout can look like chronic tension, urgency that never actually turns off, difficulty resting even when there's time to rest, filling time for rest with more to dos. So always thinking about the next task, the next thing on the list. And for me personally, it wound up being a high blood pressure diagnosis. So, it can look like a lot of things, but the point is the system is staying mobilized. And after a while, once you've done that for so many years, as we all have, then that pressure starts to feel like it's just normal. It's just part of the process. but in reality, it's not normal. And this kind of brings up another identity question that, and I love this one. Think about this. What if the people most likely to miss burnout are the most competent people in the room? We don't tend to look at it like that. And so, when you start thinking about it like that, it's like, okay, burnout often hides inside continued competence. And why? Because that competence, when you look like you're high functioning, when everything looks like it's rolling, that hides the strain of a highly pressurized nervous system. And so deadlines might still be getting met and problems are still getting solved, but the nervous system may still be running at full pressure. And so another question I often hear is, well, isn't that really just being driven? Isn't that what driven means? But drive and pressure are actually really different. And so to kind of explain, drive feels like focused, it feels intentional, and it feels sustainable. I think those two last ones are really the clinchers, right? It feels in the difference because it feels intentional and sustainable. Whereas pressure feels urgent, it feels tight, it feels like contraction almost, and it feels very difficult to turn off. So I think the point I'm making is the key difference is whether or not the nervous system has time to recover and if the and is able to recover and come out of that activation mode. And if the system can't downshift easily, that's not just the ambition, it's the activation I was referring to.
Mm.
So then the next logical question becomes, well, what's actually happening in the body then? Because when pressure continues long enough, the nervous system is never shutting off and it just stays in a mobilized state. You might have heard of fight or flight or activated states like that. And that happens even when nothing urgent is going on. And so this can again show up as hypervigilance, always at the ready, scanning for problems, scanning for something to happen. It can show as disrupted sleep or insomnia, or it can be in that chronic tension I mentioned that never fully releases or resolves. And then the difficulty in truly relaxing. And then obviously in physical ailments like the one I had when I got diagnosed with high blood pressure. That was a huge turning point for me. So this isn't simply a mindset issue. This is about a regulation pattern that we see. So the reframe here is, again, burnout doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like competence, but under continuous internal strain and pressure. So you're still performing, but the system that allows you to perform is constantly overriding itself. And that version of burnout is the one that high performers often miss. So that's basically the micro session for today. And if any part of this kind of made you pause and think, well, that sounds like me, might be me, then I think the follow on, so I'll be doing these weekly, next week's session will also resonate because we're going to talk about a new definition of burnout and why many high performers don't actually recognize their own burnout, and also how we've traditionally defined burnout makes it very easy for capable people to miss the signals. So again, if this raised questions for you, I think you'll enjoy and next week will resonate with you, and we'll continue that conversation then. So I keep these really short. I love these micro sessions. Are there any questions before we jump?
No? It's
Sanamir?
almost sounding like a silent underlying thing that people fail to notice.
Right. And I mean, I think that's the thing, right? Because we're telling ourselves, thanks, Stanimira, um, that everything looks fine. So we're not scanning for that underlying thing, right? And what's so interesting about it is when we are hyper vigilant and always scanning for problems, we're scanning externally, not
Mm,
internally, right?
mhm,
And so
mhm.
I think that's the difference, in that hypervigilance. So Anyways, so yeah, so this was great. If you guys don't have any other questions, I'll let you go. I will be posting this later, so if you know of somebody else that this might resonate with, feel free to share it with them. Or if you have any insights afterwards and want to let me know about them, always love that. So you can always hit me up in a DM and we can chat about it privately. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you,
All right,
Vanessa.
ladies, have a good day. Take
Bye.
care.
You too.